بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد: ولا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين. Our dear young brothers and sisters, and those of us who are not so young. I talked about the young ones first because that's who this program is for. So, are you guys young? Yeah. What I want to speak about is something very, very simple today, inshallah. There's somebody who's locked up during this month of Ramadan, which is the shaitan. The shaitan is locked up, so that's why, if you notice, that we don't feel like doing any new sins in Ramadan. However, people still feel like doing some sins, but not necessarily new sins. Why? Because new sins, shaitan wants us to do any sin, so he just gives us different ideas and wants us to do any sin. But Allah has opened up the doors of paradise and closed the doors of hellfire and locked up the shayateen. So he's taken one of the evil forces out of our life. There's another evil force which remains in Ramadan, which is essentially, anybody know what it is? It's our nafs, which means our ego, essentially our habits and our lowly desires, our passions, things that we indulge in that are not halal. So what happens in Ramadan is that we might still feel like doing some sins, but if you look at the sins that you still feel like doing in Ramadan, they're usually habits. They're old habits. They're things that we're used to doing, so that's why we still feel like doing them. If somebody doesn't listen to music usually, in Ramadan, he's not going to think, here, when I'm driving, let me put the music up because it's Ramadan. Right? Because usually we won't feel like doing a new sin. It'll be an old sin that... So what Allah does is that He tells us to stop eating, drinking, and having halal relationship during the daytime. So what usually happens is that if you're used to having, when you get a bit tired in the morning at 10 o'clock or something, you're used to having a cup of coffee, right? Anybody used to having a cup of coffee about 10 o'clock? Yeah? So what happens is that when it comes to about 10 o'clock and you started feeling a bit drowsy or whatever, let me go to get a coffee. And then you suddenly tell yourself, I can't have one. Like, why can't you have one? I'm feeling tired, man. You won't be able to work. You won't be able to function. You won't be able to study properly. I need that cup of coffee or Red Bull or Prime or whatever people are on about these days, right? And they say, no, I'm fasting. I can't do that. So our nafs wants the drink or the glass of water because we're feeling tired and so on, but we're telling it, you can't have it. So initially it might protest a bit, but after 2-3 days you get used to not having it, so you actually tame your nafs. So the nafs gets tamed within 30 days. By the end of 30 days, we've tamed it from halal things. Having a cup of coffee or tea or water or a drink is usually halal, right? But we're saying you can't have it, so eventually it stops asking you, doesn't it? Doesn't fasting get a bit easier as you go along? So if that's the case, then that means it should become easier to also oppose the nafs, the passion, against haram things. Because if we can oppose it and it listens to us in halal things, then it should more so listen to us in haram things. So this month of Ramadan is a month to gain taqwa, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and I think the Shaykh read the verse as well, that fasting has been prescribed upon you. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Just as it was, fasting was prescribed on you, just as it's prescribed before. Fasting is one of the most oldest worships in the world. It's a very natural human worship because you're not doing anything in fasting. What you're actually doing is not doing something. You're not eating, not drinking, you're not engaging. You see what I'm saying? That's what fasting is about. It's a very old worship. And it's supposed to be very biologically very healthy for you as well. But spiritually it's beneficial for you because when you oppose the nafs, you get the nafs used to saying no to the shaitan when he finally comes out. That's how it's related to the shaitan. And Allah locks up the shaitan so we can prepare our nafs and our heart to oppose the shaitan when he comes out on the day of Eid. And you know what the most difficult day is, or the most dangerous day is the day of Eid. Like, you should be enjoying yourself on Eid. But that's the whole part of it. A lot of people, they say that I was so good for the whole month of Ramadan. Like, I stayed away and I was very particular. And then on the day of Eid, it was the evening, and I couldn't help it. I indulged. Shaitan comes out with a vengeance to mess up the nafs that we have just trained. That's why I believe that, you know, the 6 fasts of Shawwal that we have, there's 6 fasts that you should follow up with Ramadan. So you get reward of the full year's fast if you do those. Because 30 days of Ramadan times 10 is how much? 30 times 10? 300. You just add a 0, right? I'm not here teaching maths, but that's a simple one. 300, then 6. Fast of Shawwal times 10, 360. That's 360. That's about a year, isn't it? So you get a reward for a whole year. I believe one of the psychological, spiritual benefits of fasting 6 days afterwards is that shaitan's out, but you still feel like you're in Ramadan because you're fasting. So I think it really, really prepares us. Now, what we want to do today is I want to explain a bit about shaitan. I want to review shaitan today, right? Because we're supposed to be careful of him. We're supposed to be going against him. So the more you know your enemy, the more you know their ploys. If you look in history, whether it be Ottoman history or otherwise, one of the biggest setbacks that we've ever suffered are from the enemies you don't even know, right? If you know your enemy, you can prepare for it. When you don't know your enemy, then they can come to you from where you never even expected, and that's the most dangerous enemy. And shaitan is very, very clever, although he's very weak, because the simple way against a shaitan is say, A'udhu Billah. Any dhikr and a shaitan will run. You might say sometimes, I'm in salat, I'm in sajda, sujood, and I'm still feeling like a sin. I'm doing dhikr, aren't I? Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. But I'm still feeling like planning a sin. How is that possible then when the shaitan is supposed to run away? Think about it. Usually the sin you're planning in prayer would also usually be a sin of the nafs and not the shaitan. Shaitan can't attack you with a new sin if you're doing dhikr of Allah. So it's the nafs, it's the habits that keep coming back. Now, do you know something else? Everybody's shaitan. Whenever any person is born, there's a hadith of Sahih Muslim which says that any time a person is born, any new individual that's born in this world, there's a shaitan that becomes attached, designated and appointed for that individual. Right? And that shaitan then remains with us individually. So there's not one shaitan for the Shah family, and one for the Mangera family, and one for the Turks, and one for the Afghanis, and one for the Somalis, right? And one for, different families. It's one shaitan per person. And that shaitan has been with us since birth. And it knows us better than our parents. So, why am I telling you that? So that you should know that because shaitan knows us so well, he knows that if I go and meet that guy, I'm usually going to have an argument with him. So when I see him coming into the masjid, shaitan's going to start putting into my head everything about that guy, and my prayer is going to be spoilt. Because I'm going to be thinking, that guy's there, he did this to me, he did that to me, and right? If he knows that whenever I see her, then there's some other reactions that take place, then shaitan's going to, every time when we go to a certain website, or go online, or see something specific, shaitan's going to remind us of the pleasures that we might have enjoyed before of something else, and then slowly, it just spirals out of control. That's why the way shaitan does something is in footsteps. And this is exactly how Allah describes the shaitan in the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us much about the shaitan. And that's why we need to read reviews about the shaitan. Essentially details this whole story about shaitan, essentially, to understand the enemy, because he's out to get us. Right? وَلَأُزَيِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ وَلَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُم مِّن بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. I'm going to come to them from above them and from their right and from their left and from in front of them and from behind them. It's like you don't know where to look. It's haram everywhere. Right? You look right and there's something, and you look left and there's a reflection. You look down and there's something, and subhanallah. Right? We live in tough times. So Allah says, "Inna shaytana lakum adu." That's another verse. Shaitan is your enemy. فَاتَّخِذُوهُ عَدُوًا. Take him as your enemy. Like, make sure you treat him as an enemy, not as a friend. So, today what I want to do is just look at a few verses about exactly what Allah tells us. Because if Allah has created the shaitan and had this whole design the way it is, He's given us guidance. We just need to find the guidance. So I'm going to read just a few verses, right? Because there's many verses. I'm just going to read a few. The first verse is the one I already read, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 168. وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُّبِينٌ. And do not follow the footsteps of the shaitan, because he is your clear enemy. That's the first one. Don't follow the footsteps of the shaitan, he's your clear enemy. Number 2, verse 208 of Surah Al-Baqarah again. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا ادْخُلُوا فِي السِّلْمِ كَافَّةً وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُّبِينٌ. Same surah, just some verses later. O people who believe, enter into Islam fully and wholesomely. Don't just sit on the fence. 1 foot inside and 1 foot outside. But fully inside, and do not follow the footsteps of the shaitan. Footsteps of the shaitan again. Because he is your clear enemy. Have you ever seen the footsteps of shaitan? He leaves some really interesting marks. Have you ever seen it? Footsteps, they're invisible though. Right? The next verse is from Surah Al-An'am, verse 142. كُلُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُّبِينٌ. Eat of that which Allah has provided you. Whatever's halal, eat. Don't follow the footsteps of shaitan. Again, Allah is using the same words. What are these footsteps? How do you find them? He is your clear enemy. And then the last verse for today I'm going to mention, there's many more, but I'll just, Surah An-Nur, verse 21. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان ومن يتبع خطوات الشيطان فإنه يأمر بالفحشاء والمنكر. This one adds a bit more. O people who believe, do not follow the footsteps of the shaitan, and whoever follows the footsteps of the shaitan, then shaitan only instructs, only orders you to do unchaste things, immoral things, and wrong things. Everything wrong and immoral is from the shaitan. And that's what the footsteps are going to be. So don't think you're going to get anywhere with this. So what are these footsteps of the shaitan? How do you figure them out? So let's explore a few ideas here, just to give us an idea. And inshallah, we can understand the footsteps of the shaitan. We will know from the first step. I better be careful here, because these look like the footsteps of shaitan. Shaitan doesn't take the footsteps, makes us take the footsteps. It's from basically the minor to the major. From small issues, breaking the taboo as we go along, breaking the stigma, removing the embarrassment, removing the sense of haya and chastity and modesty, and then eventually falling into the sin that you would never have dreamed of falling into. I'll give you a simple example. I'll give you an example of a young girl. She is about 17, 18. She's been brought up in a very, very religious home. Hardly ever spoke to guys, right? Very, very pious, righteous, balanced family. Went to Islamic schools only, all girls Islamic schools as well. Hardly ever spoke to boys. And then now she has to go to college. She's about 18 years old or whatever, 17, 18 years old. She goes to college the first day. And it's a mixed class. And there's a guy in her class and he smiles at her. And she gets very, very embarrassed. It's like, man, this guy's smiling at me, like, what's wrong with him? Right? So she kind of looks away. A day later or something, there's a guy who goes to her, man, you look really pretty. How does she process that? Right? So initially she's very embarrassed. She's just like avoiding it. After a few days, there's people making passes because that's what guys do. I'm not saying that's what they should do. I'm saying unfortunately that's what they do. So I'm not saying you should do that. Right? Just in case you think this guy's giving fatwas here, that's what guys should be doing and the girl should be looking aside. No, that's not what you should be doing. But that's what guys do, unfortunately, because they've got the hormones raging. Right? But marriage, unfortunately, takes place much later. Right? And I'm not calling for child marriage, okay? Just in case somebody thinks we're talking about that. But you know what I'm saying? It's just like people are getting 25 and 30 before they get married, you know? But anyway, after a week or two, Shaitan's obviously working on her as well. Now, on one of these occasions, he says something to her and all she does is smile back. She doesn't look away this time. She just smiles back. And that's it. Communication is on. And then after that, it just goes on from there to step after step until eventually it gets to exchanging numbers and then a'udhu billah. The question is that on that first day that she went to that school, do you think she would have ever fallen into zina on that first day? Do you think she would have ever committed a major sin on that day? Hardly likely, like hardly. It takes a while for it to chip away, right? Allah has given us a natural switch. Have you noticed that if you like shopping, how many of you like shopping? Like when you go around the aisles of a nice store, how many of you like shopping and going around? Some people like just go in and buy literally the first product and get out, but there's others who like shopping. How many of you like shopping? Okay. Sisters, you like shopping? Yeah? Have you noticed that you go around all the aisles, checking everything out when you've got some time, there's 2 or 3 aisles that you can just ignore? Which ones are they? Which aisles? There are a few aisles that you can just ignore and say, well, I don't need this stuff. The beer and wine. Only this guy knows. What's wrong with you guys? You like that aisle or what? Only this little guy knows, man. I like to be interactive, so don't feel scared of saying, come on. Otherwise it gets boring, right? Alhamdulillah, every time you go past 2, 3 of those aisles, you're like, Alhamdulillah, I don't have to waste money on that. I don't even check it up. I have no time to waste on that. You could have the prettiest looking mother, sister, auntie, but the switch is off. Just Alhamdulillah, Allah has put a natural switch in that. No, that's the no-go-to area unless some people are really messed up, right? So, what shaitan does is that he slowly chips away at these things to remove that natural shyness that Allah places in a human being. You listen to propaganda, you see other people do it, and then the shaitan is just constantly in your mind, messing you around. Go for it, go for it. No, that's wrong, that is wrong. You can't expect on the first day that somebody's going to fall into that haram, but give it some time and the right bad environment, and then this is what happens. So that's one example of the footsteps of the shaitan. I'm going to give us a few other examples. You've just finished school, or you haven't finished school, but you want to make some money and get some experience, so you start going to work somewhere at a store, right? For example, in a business. And the guy trusts you, so he puts you at the cash register to take the money. And he tells you, he gets to trust you a lot, so then what he does, he says, okay, I want you to shut the shop today, right? And what you have to do is, you have to take out all the money out of the cash register where there's cash. I mean, it's all moving into credit card now, but, and when you count it up, shut it down, and then, now you've done that, you've put it into a packet, and then there's a customer or two that still come in, and they spend $10, $15 or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'm going to have to open this whole packet up, count it all up again. And you think, okay, you know what? I'm about to leave. I'll just sort it out tomorrow. So you just put it in your pocket and you go, by mistake or whatever. The next day, you come to work, and you've never stolen in your life. You've never taken anything in your life. You give that packet to the boss, to the manager, whoever he is, and you forget about the $10. The manager doesn't ask you because he doesn't know. He didn't check the cameras or whatever it is. He doesn't know. So now shaitan will tell you, and you're going, oh, look, I've still got that $10. I need to give it to the boss tomorrow. And then shaitan's going to tell you, he's not going to find out. You're only making like $50 every few days or something. $10 is a lot of money. So you just think, he's not going to find out. Or what happens is that you went to the store and you had no other money and you just had that $10. And you're like, okay, I'll give him back $10. So you spend that $10 and then after that, you think that the boss didn't find out. He's never going to know. So then what you'll start doing, slowly, is you'll take another $10 and then it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until they'll start noticing. It always starts off small because it's always footsteps of the shaitan. My friend, I've got a friend who's a sheikh. He works as a chaplain, like a teacher, in a youth offenders prison. That means young adults, so between the ages of 18 and 20 something, right? That's the prison especially for them. So there's a Muslim kid in there, and he was a number of them. He's talking to them, and he's just saying, how did you end up here? One of them is blaming his mother. One of the young guys, he's blaming his mother for being in prison. It's like, why? Did your mother make you deal drugs, or what was it? No, it was something a lot more simpler than that, and you'd be shocked. A lot more simpler. He said that when I was a little kid, not your age, when you're 2-3 years old. You know when you're 2-3 years old, when you go to your cousin's house, and they've got a toy that you don't have, and then you played with it, and then it's time to go home. What do you try to do with that toy? No, you don't try to steal it. No, don't be that bad. What do you try to do with that toy? You try to take it, right? You try to take it with you. Like, I want to take this home. Even though you got tons of toys at home, but they're boring because you had them. This one's new, right? You haven't had it, even though it might be an old toy. What does your auntie tell you about that toy? Just take it. Let him take it. What does your mum say? Your mum says, no, you can't take that. But your auntie says, take it. Let him take it. It's okay. It's only one toy. We've had it for a long time. Your mum says, no, you can't have that toy. His mum, you never used to say anything. His mum never used to say anything. The auntie's like, take it. So he gets this sense of entitlement that he can take whatever he wants. He's never been told to stop himself. And you know when your parents tell you to stop yourself, it's to teach us restraint, that you can't have everything in this world because you literally can't have everything in this world. Like, you'd get messed up if you tried to do that. You can have a lot of things, but you can't have everything. You can't have everything that you want. It's bad for you anyway, and it's just physically not possible anyway. All right? So that's what they teach us. But however, this guy wasn't taught that. So he would then go into his corner store and find a way to put a few things into his pocket because he just had a sense of entitlement. This addiction that I can take what I want. He got his sister involved. His sister used to stand, at the corner of the aisle to watch if the guy is looking. I don't think there were many cameras in those days or whatever. And then he would steal. Now, slowly, when this only gets worse. You have to remember, this only gets worse. You get braver and bolder and braver and bolder. So eventually, he started stealing from the mall. So local shops was one thing. Then he started stealing from the mall. And that's when he got caught and put into prison. And he blames his mum for it now. Do you think he should blame his mum? Yes and no? Yes? Poor mum, man. Maybe to a certain degree. But yeah. So can you see, did it start off from stealing at the mall? Where did it start? Feeling sense of entitlement. You understand entitlement, that word? Right? It's not epistemology. It's just entitlement. Okay? So, footsteps of the shaitan. And you know what? I know we're talking about children and youth so far. It's the same with adults. Two guys, they decide to do business together. They become partners. When you become a partner, like let's just say that both of us are going to find products and we're both going to sell them and we're going to split the profits. Right? That's our business, 50-50 partners. What happens is, I find a customer, a very lucrative customer, and I tell him, shaitan puts me in my mind, that if I do this through the business, I'm going to have to share the profit. I could just supply him on the side, not through the business, and he just pays me on the side. But that wasn't your agreement. Agreement was that we're going to both do business together, and we're going to share the profits together. Now, I'm going against that. It sounds very innocent, but slowly, I might do that in a bit, and then eventually your partner's going to find out. And then you just mess up the business. Rather, just dissolve it and start your own business. You could do it that way if you wanted to. So slowly, it happens like that. Another one is you're used to praying all the prayers. And then slowly, one day, you're in a bit of a hurry, so you miss out just the sunnah. You miss out a sunnah. I'm talking about those who do pray, okay? Those who are struggling to pray, this example will be different for them. But you usually pray, mashallah, on time, and you're praying your sunnah prayers as well, maybe even your nafil prayers. But someday you were in a hurry, so you miss out your nafil or your sunnah prayer. And suddenly your sunnah prayers will eventually lose value in your sight because you're used to missing them. Then eventually you'll miss a fard prayer, you'll just delay it and you'll do it later until eventually you'll miss those as well. There's somebody who goes, he's never drank in his life, never had any haram drink or anything. But he goes with his friends, university or whatever it is, and they go out to the bar. And he wants to fit in. So he goes with them and he says, look, I'm only going to have orange juice. So 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, he only has orange juice. Do they have orange juice in bars, by the way? They don't. Oh, and I think he shook his head, that's why I thought you might know. So I don't know if you get orange juice there or not, but I'm assuming maybe iced tea, orange juice or whatever, okay? But eventually the environment is such that you see people getting a bit tipsy and, and eventually you might try some. And then after that, it's a downhill. That's how it all started. How did people start smoking? It was, and who that cigarette came from? A friend, right? A friend, a so-called friend. He got one from somewhere, maybe from his dad or from his uncle, or bought one and just decided, he was like, try it. No, I'm not going to try it. But eventually you want to fit in. And peer pressure is very, very dangerous. Peer pressure is very, very powerful. They did a study, and you can check this out on YouTube, 14, 15-year-olds. How old are you? 10. You're only 10 yet. So 14, 15-year-olds in the park. And one of the guys, he takes out a spray can, and he says to one of the guys, he says, go and do some graffiti. You know what graffiti is? It's like spraying, right? And disfiguring buildings. So go and do some artwork. Don't do graffiti. So he goes, and the guy's like, no, I'm not going to do this. So what do they say? You're a chicken. In England, they call him chicken. What do you call him here? Same thing, right? Not hens. Not hens, right? It's chicken, yeah. So would you fall for that? If you were 14 and your friends were on your case, do it, come on, just do it, otherwise you can't be with us and all of that. Why wouldn't you do it? Don't you want to be friends with them? Don't you need that group? Don't you need to be in that gang, in that group? Wouldn't you do it? There'd be a lot of pressure, right, to do it. So most do end up doing it, by the way. Most do end up doing it. You know the few that actually don't do it? You know what they have? Something really interesting. They're the ones who have a really, really solid home to go to. A solid home environment to go to. Why? Psychologically, if the choice you have is, I might lose these friends, they're going to make fun of me, I might lose these friends. Are you willing to lose these friends? Are you willing to lose your belonging? Do you need to belong somewhere? That's the question. That's the peer pressure. If you have a strong home environment, which makes you feel very accommodating and comfortable and, then you think, I don't care about this. The only way you can escape this is if you run away. Like if you literally walk away. Because if you stay there, there's just going to be pressure, 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 unless you're very, very strong and you dominate them. But most people aren't that strong. So if you can just walk away from there, just go literally, like just drown their sounds and just close your ears and just go, you'll be saved. Otherwise, you get into it. The first guy that This is what shaitan does. As I said, this is what shaitan does. He only has to get you into something once, then it becomes a habit once or twice, and then it becomes a habit, and then you do it because of habit now, even in Ramadan, even though shaitan is out of the picture. For example, those who smoke. Do you remember, or who used to smoke, for example, do you remember the first guy who got you into smoking? Where is he today? Or she? He's long gone somewhere. Got you into smoking and you're dealing with the smoking now? That guy's long gone. That's what happens with sin. Shaitan doesn't have to push you to do a sin. He just gives you ideas, and because he knows what makes you tick and what excites you and so on, he just gives you ideas. And then we take them or we don't take them. These are all the examples just so that we can understand shaitan. Same thing when it comes to watching haram. It starts off with the soft stuff, the basic stuff, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse, because human beings just like to get more intense and more intense and more refined and more particular. You know the guy who just finished school and he's going to get a job, so what happens is that he needs a blazer to look formal. So what he does is that any blazer will work for him. You know, from a thrift store, a borrowed one, but give him a few years in the corporate world, and then it has to be Canali and Giorgio Armani and Gucci. It's no longer can be like a basic. The kid, when he gets a mobile phone, a cell phone for the first time, any phone works in it. Doesn't have to be the latest phone. You got a phone, you'll be very excited. Give that a few years and then you have to have the latest phone. Everything in the world, we usually become more refined about. And that's the same thing when it comes to sins. However, when it comes to Ramadan, we're still doing the same no-frills Ramadan of 20 years ago. We haven't become updated in our worship in Ramadan to get more discriminatory in the way we do our worship and upgrading our Ramadan. May Allah give us that tawfiq. So it all starts off small, and that is the footsteps of the shaitan. Now this is something for the adults. Wives are constantly complaining that my husband is talking to a co-worker. Not any co-worker, it's a co-worker, right? On the WhatsApp and so on. So you talk to the guy, it's like, oh, it's just innocent banter. I know my limits. But your wife's getting paranoid, man. What's wrong with you? That's how it starts. It starts off with a few exchanges. The nafs is very powerful if you indulge it. And especially when it comes to zina, one is la taznoon, do not fornicate. That's one. But Allah says, la taqrabu zina, la taqrabu zina, don't even get close, because it's just very easy to go from the initial phases to the worst phase. So be very careful about these things, because they're all the footsteps. Likewise, when it comes to haram friendships, gang culture, it starts off slow. For example, the way the drug guys work is that what they do is they grab you after school and they buy you, in England, they'll buy you chicken and chips from the chicken and chip store close to the school, right? And now, a free pack of chicken and chips, what do you have chicken chips here? Right? Or pizza or something like that. After school, man, you just want to, get one of those and he gives you free. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. And then you're like, man, this guy's giving me free chicken and chips all the time. Next time he's going to say, I've given you chicken and chips 3 times now. You need to pay me back. It's like, that wasn't a deal, right? You're going to have to pay me back, otherwise we're going to beat you up. How do I pay you back? I don't have that kind of money. So they say, look, it's simple. What you do is take this little packet and just go and deliver it to so-and-so. Go to that street or whatever, and somebody will pick it up from you. It's like, okay, that's cool. That's easy, right? I can pay for my chicken and chips like that. This is real stuff I'm telling you about. Now what happens is, you've delivered the package, you think you've paid off your debt, right? Now the guy's going to come to you and said, here, there's another package. And you kind of find out that this is drugs. I don't want to do this anymore. He's going to say, well, shall I tell on you, because you already did it last week. You already delivered drugs. Shall I tell on you? You're blackmailed into it now. And that's how they use children to run drugs in many places, because children don't attract attention. So children are going around doing that. Slowly, slowly, if somebody is giving you something for free, be very, very, very careful. Right? Be very, very careful, because it's slowly, slowly, that's how it gets into it. Right? So you understand how the footsteps of shaitan work now? Slowly, slowly, slowly. Right? You be rude to your mum once, twice, and then after that it'll become a habit and you won't even think it's bad. You know, there's a lot of young guys, they're very rude. They don't even realize they're being rude because that's how their friends act. And they all act the same way, so they don't even realize they're being rude. And when somebody tells you you're being rude, how am I being rude? My friends are like that. Like, that's what I know. You know what I'm saying? That's what I know. That's everybody acts like that. That's why you have to have good friends so that you know what's good and you know what's bad. Otherwise, if everything's bad around you, then the bad becomes normal. And that's the footsteps of the shaitan. So shaitan never makes you take drugs the first time. He'll never make you commit zina the first time. He'll never make you drink the first time. It'll be slowly, slowly, step-by-step process. We need to stay healthy and we need to stay correct. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection from the footsteps of the shaitan and the shaitan himself. Keep remembering Allah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge in Allah from shaitan the accursed. Whenever bad thoughts come into your mind, just remember that this could be the footsteps of the shaitan. And just be careful. Ask somebody if you have to. If it sounds too good to be true, then it's probably a problem. Okay? So we ask Allah for tawfiq. I don't want to lengthen your night today, but I think that's enough for examples, inshallah. All right? You guys, little guys, have any questions? No? Yes?